Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My dad said, be an actor, my son, but be a comical one. They'll be standing in lines.
It was a long time coming. I was always a big fan of stand-up, always a big fan of any kind of comedy you could mention, all the way back to 50s and 60s radio plays that I grew up listening to. And eventually, having gone to Fringe every year, year upon year upon year, eventually hit 30 and decided it was just time to do it. So thankfully I had a friend that was a professional comedian, a fellow by the name of Billy Kirkwood, who you're probably aware of. So Billy gave me my first gig in my hometown, did my first 10-minute slot, petrified but didn't horribly die. So that was the start of it. That was my first gig and haven't looked back since then. What's the most exciting thing that's happened to you apart from meeting this lovely man here? What's that one thing that's really fucking, got you excited? Really fucking, really
got me excited.
really got you there, aye.
Going swimming with whale sharks in Australia.
Ooh. Were you there, Sam? Were you there? Was this? It was Sam in an outfit. Scottish comedy tends to have an honesty, a kind of passion, an anger behind it that a lot of comedians don't have in other countries. If you travel within the UK, you go elsewhere outside, elsewhere in Europe, there is a tone to Scottish comedy that I think speaks to people in a kind of primal way. We are generally an unhappy people. We like to be unhappy, we like when things are miserable, and that's just fuel for the fire, and that's where we get a unique take on things, I think. There is a big difference between Glasgow and Edinburgh comedy insofar as the Glasgow audiences tend to be lively, warm, nice, whereas the Edinburgh audiences are far more restrained. Very nice people. Edinburgh is a wonderful city to play, hundreds of fantastic venues, but when you do well in Glasgow, you get a round of applause, an ovation, shake of the hand. In Edinburgh, they'll smile at you and leave. That's when you're done well in Edinburgh, when they smile. More reserved, I think is the way to put it.
I first got into comedy by coming down here to Yes Bar with my girlfriend. There was a comedy night on and we were sitting watching, and my girlfriend had suggested that I give it a go, that I was pretty good and that I should try it. I think what's unique about Scottish comedy is, without sounding funny, its sense of humour. I think anywhere that's predominantly working class has got a kind of, Scottish people have kind of got a rough edge to them. They're traditionally kind of thought of by their English counterparts as very scary, kind of hard people. I think it's a unique sense of humour the world over, but it's a very hard sense of humour, it's a very thick-skinned sense of humour.
I think comedy in Scotland comes from working class to a large extent. Well, maybe Ricky Fulton didn't, to a large extent, because, and
it's real.
I mean, think of Still Game or something like that, which is... It's really earthy, isn't it?
We had some of the best. We had Ricky Fulton long before, obviously, and Billy Connolly, although he's for far back as well, and I think they kind of set the...
Kevin Bridges and Frankie Boyle. But again, I think what makes it unique again is the accent.
Aye.
But
They
for
set
us,
the
that's
bar.
what makes it funnier.
They set the bar for it, so people are still trying to live up to them.
And
That's
you've
why
got
they
people
struggle.
just now like Billy Connolly still working, and Frankie Boyle and Kevin Bridges. Then
And they can travel the world
they're
because
three
people think
of
they're
the
funny
best
everywhere.
comedians on the planet,
Aye.
and they're all 3 Glaswegians as well.
And I don't think they ever really understand them when they do travel, like Australia and different places like that, and they still laugh.
And Chewing the Fat's still the funniest
Aye.
thing that's ever been produced.
Definitely.
I think audiences do respond differently to male and female comedians. Female comedians have more obstacles to overcome. Oftentimes you'll find a crowd is predominantly men, however there is some women in the crowd. A lot of men have the mistaken belief women can't be funny or aren't funny. I've had people not turn up at shows because I have a female headliner. They just think women can't do it, which is nonsense, obviously. If you have a couple in the room and a female comic comes on and she happens to be even remotely pretty, the women will cross their arms and not laugh, and if their man laughs, he gets a kick under the table. So there are all kinds of obstacles like this that a female comic has to overcome that a male comic doesn't. So if you see a female comic that's made it, they've worked even harder than the male counterparts. It's unfair, but it's true.
I had studied at drama school, studied acting, and when I left drama college, I was getting a few bits of kind of odd jobs like voiceovers and things, but I wanted to kind of perform. So I decided to kind of start doing stand-up comedy. I went to Viv G's comedy course at Strathclyde Uni. You learn kind of to find your writing style basically, and it was great because I became far more creative than I had been in ages. Then we did our first gig and that was it. That was me, caught the bug. I went into performing because I was really inspired by like Dawn French, because I grew up loving French and Saunders, loving The Vicar of Dibley, and I really enjoyed doing like sketch comedy. And obviously that's what French and Saunders are kind of most famous for. But there's so many other comedians that have inspired me in different ways. It's perhaps like the way that they have a certain presence on stage, or their style of material and things like this. There's so many different influences I feel I have.
My inspiration for comedy is a combination of the famous guys and family. My father thinks he's a comedian. Used to get pushed at weddings and stand up and tell Billy Connolly jokes and get kind of booed off his stages. And he always phones me up and says, I've got a joke for you, I've got a joke for you. He goes, thanks to, and never use it anyway. So he inspires me that way. And obviously anybody who's ever watched a Billy Connolly gig or DVD, video, this is the reason. He's the reason you want to do it. And guys growing up like Jonathan Watson and Tony Roper and Gregor Fisher, Rab C. Nisbet, Naked Video, Only an Excuse, things like that for me growing up. It was raw, Glasgow, Scottish kind of sense of humour, and there was tragedy in it, but through tragedy there was humour in it, and that's pretty much all that's inspired me to give this a go. I've
grown up in Glasgow. I think Glasgow humour, even within Scottish humour, is quite unique. I think we've always had a particular way of that self-deprecating humour, and I think that's more prevalent in Glasgow. Performers used to be terrified of coming to Glasgow. You came to Glasgow, you knew straight away whether the audience liked you or not. And this is continued through in terms of all kinds of performance, because the Glasgow audience is not afraid of standing up and walking out if they're not enjoying it. They're not afraid of telling you they're not enjoying it. But equally, they're not afraid to tell you that they're absolutely bloody loving it.
Glasgow's a lot funnier. There are more worldly group of people. Edinburgh, relatively dry, conservative, less likely, I think, to have humour.
Edinburgh doesn't have comedy.
It tries.
They have English people that live there, and they don't have comedy, whereas Glasgow does.
I think Glasgow people are a lot more ready to laugh, although they say they're they're quite a critical audience in theatres, don't they? Yes. But I think Glasgow people, whenever I'm in Glasgow, one of my sons is in Glasgow, and any time I've been there, everybody's ready to talk to you and share
they're comics.
A
lot of them are just natural comics. Whereas Edinburgh's, and I can speak from experience, is slightly more reserved.
Toffee-nosed.
Yes. I didn't like to see it, but...
In my opinion, the difference between Glasgow comedy, Edinburgh comedy is some guys are for Edinburgh, some guys are for Glasgow, and I don't mean that to sound daft. Glasgow comedy has got a bit of an edge to it, just my opinion. Edinburgh comics seem to be the stereotypical kind of intelligent, kind of upmarket comedians, or English comedians which seem to come up to Edinburgh. But the Glasgow comedy scene, I think, is just a bit harder, a bit edgier.
Now, women aren't very good at keeping secrets. Men are very, very good. But to make the seesaw work, we need something else here that women are good at and men aren't very good at. That keeps the wheel turning, because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Everybody knows that. Yin, yang, the whole shooting match, right? So, women aren't good at secrets. Men are very good. Women can hold in a fart. Men can't. What are we to learn from this? Do you want a woman to keep a secret? Whisper it up her ass.
I would say my favourite place to perform is where we are right now, is in the Yes Bar. The best venues typically are small rooms with a night kind of atmosphere. Something about this room here, if it's set up properly, It's a wonderful little environment, it's a wonderful place to do comedy, and the whole room just works. It has a really nice little New York comedy club feel. In terms of crowds, I like happy, drunk crowds. I'll be honest, my job primarily, although I am an act as well, is a host and MC. And I like interaction. I don't like talking to people that just stare blankly at me. I want them to talk back. I want people to think they're funny so I can show them they're not. I like the interaction, I like the back and forward, so it tends to be a few drinks in, not bluttered, a few drinks in, you get your best crowds.
My favourite room to play is this room here in Yes Bar. It's a great room. Some of the best nights I've had as a stand-up comedian have been in this room. I've played the Glasgow Stand. It is up there with the kind of achievements of any stand-up comedian in Scotland who wants to play there, because the audience are just, they're right in your face, and the atmosphere in it's brilliant. The audience I like to have is, I like a rowdy audience. I like an audience who aren't scared to open their mouth back. They like a bit of interaction. I like to make my gigs personal. I talk to people, then I'll rip into them if they're being cheeky. If they're heckling me, I'll give a go back. But as long as they know that they're part of the show as much as I am, because the audience are there paying the money to come and watch that.
As a woman, it's definitely much easier to make it in comedy now than it would have been years and years ago, because years ago you'd have had the music halls and working men's clubs, right? And as a woman, you probably wouldn't have been allowed to perform in a working man's club. Now, there's so many more avenues to do your comedy. There's so many comedy clubs. I mean, here we are, we're sitting in the basement of a pub, and it's become this thriving comedy club.
I think there's a lot of corporate wankers have grabbed a hold of comedy and see that there's an opportunity to make money. If you ever go through to the Edinburgh Festival, it is essentially a corporate wank fest. You can't walk down the Royal Mile without being handed shitloads of paper. I think it's taken a slant away from the guys like myself who just want to get up, do 5, 10, 15 minutes, get a couple of pints and go home. There's a commercial element to comedy as well, whether your face fits, whether your humour catches on. Social media's got a big part of that as well. Comedians who would maybe have never seen the light of day are now getting on TV, and the big kind of commercial companies are courting them, punting out a DVD tour and raking in millions. And that's not to say that there's anything against that. That's, you know, each to their own, but it's turned into a corporate wank fest, and I just think people have seen an investment to make in it, as opposed to the art form of stand-up comedy.
Comedy is very popular in Scotland just now, and I don't think that'll change. You'll find that different kinds of comedy will prevail at different times, whether it be variety, whether it be, you know, anything that's come through will change and ebb over time. Comedy will always be popular as long as there's things to moan about, as long as there are people in power that we don't like, as long as there are laws being passed and people are skint. And let's face it, it's been that way as long as I know, and it's going to be that way for a long time.
I think it's relative. I think that society's changed. Things that you'd find funny back in the old days maybe are not relevant nowadays. For example, the sort of racism and sexism jokes, those are no longer relevant to today's humour. Yes, we can all still make the kind of mother-in-law joke, but it needs to be done in a different way, I think.
When I'm nervous, I do random things like annoy my girlfriend. Well, she's now my fiancée. Is that all right with you? She's now my... When I'm nervous, I annoy my fiancée. I shout, I just kind of pace about the house.
I don't get nervous in this room anymore. I've done this room over 100 times, and it's just exciting and fun. I see a great many new acts that do get very, very nervous, and I tell them the best thing they can do is do very bad gigs. There are gigs all over Glasgow and Edinburgh and all over the country where the audience don't want you there. The audience are angry that you're there. They don't like you, they won't laugh, they might even throw things. And in the short term, that seems like a terrible situation to be in, but it builds up your shell. And if you have done some nice, nasty gigs and survived, then you know what that is, and you know the worst that can happen, and you'll step on every other stage just happy there's a microphone and a light. Just do it, get over it, nothing will happen. But if you're still struggling with nerves, go and do a bad room, and you'll see it's not that bad.
Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My dad said be an actor, my son, but be a comical one, they'll be sad.